This episode is brought to you by Audi. The road is calling. Embrace the thrill of the drive with the all-new, fully electric Audi Q6 e-tron. Featuring effortless power, serious acceleration, and advanced Audi tech. It's not just a new EV. It's a new way to experience driving. The all-new, fully electric Audi Q6 e-tron is here. The next chapter of Audi starts now.
You are tuned in to the FowlWeather Podcast, the forecast to your next successful hunt. Coming to you from the home office, Jack's Reef, New York.
And here we go, the long-awaited long-term forecast part 2. The results are in. The data crunching is done. The FowlWeather Podcast long-term forecast part 2 dives into what the rest of duck season looks like. When will the cold show? Does Old Man Winter hide in the Arctic once again this year, or make an appearance as an Alberta Clipper? What's snow got to do with it? All that in this week's duck migration forecast. Hey everyone across duck country, thanks for listening, and remember to share, like, and follow us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Facebook, and Instagram. Also, if you get a chance, take a second to rate us on Spotify and Apple Podcasts as well, and share the FowlWeather Podcast with friends. Remember, you know where the ducks are at before the ducks know where they're at. We're really thankful for our every week listeners, and you know who you are, those that never miss a single migration forecast episode each Monday morning. Y'all are as ate up as me about ducks, duck biology, and duck migration. Our dedicated weekly listeners pick the best days to hunt because the FowlWeather Podcast forecasts fresh ducks hot from the north. Shoot the ducks from the north before they know where they're at. Remember also that we are the only science-based duck migration forecast available, brought to you by hunters for hunters. On this episode, we are really excited to bring to you the most informed podcast about the upcoming December and January weather and how it will affect duck migration for the rest of your duck season. I'm your host, Dr. Mike, coming to you from the home office in Jack's Reef. Man, it is just a great time of year. There's that smell in the air. Bucks are in rut in many areas. The ducks are on the move. The leaves are dropping as the temperatures dip. The wood stove's running. The kitchen smells like pumpkin pie. And it's duck season. I was in the deer stand the other day and reflecting on all my seasons past and how there's just too few of them. Just think about that for a second. Each year goes by so fast, right? Laughter in the kitchen before the hunt, lifting the old dog into the truck, packing the gear by headlamp the night before, hooking up the boat, that rush of navigating the marsh in the dark, the sunrise, and the ducks appear, or don't. The good times afterwards, making amazing wild animals into food. There are just too few of these moments for me. I still remember my first duck hunt, and it wasn't spectacular. I do remember shooting a lot before bagging my first duck. It was a hen mallard. No pickiness about this, right? In Western New York growing up, it's not like we had an abundance of ducks. So my first duck was a hen mallard. Dad didn't sit me down and say, only shoot greenheads or anything like that. He handed me a couple boxes of shells and said, shoot at ducks. Everything there was pretty much legal. So it was a hen mallard, hit the ground with her legs still kicking when I got to her. But it was a duck bagged, and ever since that day, I've been hooked. I want to know everything about every species of duck, and of course I really wanted to know what makes them migrate. I wanted to know what they ate and why. I wanted to travel and see ducks in their natural habitats across the country. But man, there are just really too few years to take it all in, almost too much to experience. So as listeners of the FowlWeather Podcast, do me this favor. Don't have regrets later in life. Drink and breathe it all in. Make sure you take the time, as they say, to smell the roses. See the marsh for everything it has to offer, not just the shooting, but the wet dog, all those cool plants. Learn if ducks eat those plants or the food produced by them, the seeds, the tubers. Learn about that stuff. Take in the changing leaves. Those white oak leaves that turn reddish brown and kind of rustle in the wind over you in the timber. The big wave and the flat as glass days on the lakes. The broken clouds, the streams of swans and those swirling cranes headed south. Whatever it is in your duck world that makes it tick, take the time to stop. Take it all in. Because we have just too few seasons and life doesn't last forever. When the marsh stops and your legs are too slow and old to make it all happen like you once did, those memories will last forever if you capture them today by taking the time to stop and smell the marsh. Make that marsh last forever in your mind, but also pass on your passion for the ducks to the next generation. Remember that you, as a duck hunter, got that way because someone before you paved a path of waterfowl conservation and someone taught you the ropes of duck hunting. Make that marsh last forever in someone else's mind as well. With any luck, that marsh itself will live on forever, right? No regrets. Make that marsh live on wherever, whenever, and for whomever. All right, so that was some deer stand reflection. No bucks or does for the wife and I at the farm yet. Some bruisers are cruising around, and we've both passed on, I'd say, several dozen small bucks now, some of the same ones over and over again, but nothing yet. So we're still in our duck split, so our local duck season's currently closed, which helps us really focus on rutting bucks. Kind of an addiction lately. Even if they are just big, brown, boring rectangles that come out and eat some corn and eat some soybeans, and you just have to hit them in kind of the right place to make them tip over. Anyhow, if you haven't gone back and listened to episode 2, I Make Gumbo, nobody should probably listen to that episode. It's kind of a fun tongue-in-cheek look at deer hunting compared to duck hunting, but honestly, deer are in no way as cool as the diversity of ducks out there and duck hunting opportunities. Again, I think that's what fuels my passion for ducks and duck conservation today. And hey, a little shout out here. Congrats to one of my graduate students at ESF where I teach, Hunter Collins, just got hired as a regional biologist for the South Atlantic region with Ducks Unlimited. A great kid with a big future in waterfowl conservation, so go get him, Hunter, and if folks see him, congratulate him for his well-earned new position with Ducks Unlimited in the South Atlantic region. Headed home, he's a Virginia boy, and he's back working at home. So trained him up in New York and sent him back like we've done with so many students. So thanks, Hunter, and he still has to defend his thesis too, so hang in there, bud, and we'll get you through the program. Appreciate you, and good luck with all that you do in the future. How about you give our sponsors a listen this week if you haven't before? The Farmland Group and Wildlife Strategies are doing amazing work in the Mid-South and beyond. So please take the time to have a listen and see if their products are for you. Even if not, support them by having a listen. They're really, truly great resources for the hunter conservationist. Next up, our exclusive long-term forecast for duck migration through the rest of your season. So please, stick with us. Look, folks, the Farmland Group across the Mid-South is your one-stop shop for real estate brokerage, consulting, management, lending, and appraisals. If you own land or you want land, the Farmland Group is where it's at. With over $500 million in farm sales and growing, Gwynn and Shelby Smith have you covered. Look, if you're thinking about buying or selling, contact the Farmland Group to access their full suite of services. If you already own property and want to build equity and value, the Farmland Group gets it done. If you're looking to purchase a new property, well, they get that done too, and they have access to some of the best lending available. Looking to sell? Get it appraised with a Farmland Group affiliated appraiser. But let's be clear for our listenership too. They also offer farm and hunt property management to create places that attract more ducks and more bucks. Who doesn't want that? More ducks and more bucks. Let the Farmland Group build value into your property. Find them today at farmlg.com. That's farmlg.com. You're not going to be disappointed. Contact Shelby Smith today at farmlg.com and let him know that the FowlWeather Podcast sent you their way. Okay, so I know this is the long-awaited and favorite episode for many, especially after last year's dismal season for so many of you. Everyone wants the good news about the duck weather, the duck migration weather that's coming. As a refresher, if you are interested in how we predicted duck migration last year, please go ahead and look up episode 29, Where Were the Ducks? I know we don't want a recap of last year, but I just did an email back and forth for a bit with Josh Osborne, who is with Forbes Biological Station, and he flies and compiles the data from their waterfowl surveys of the Illinois and Mississippi River. We hope to get him on again soon for a migration update, but he basically said maybe we wait a week because the numbers still are not looking good in this part of the world. Actually, it has been pretty mild for most of our friends across duck country. Nationwide, October ranked 129th warmest out of 130 years that are on record, and precipitation ranked second driest of 130 years. So as a country, we've been very hot and very dry. Not ducky weather for sure. Specific to some places that might be of interest as far as duck migration goes, North Dakota, South Dakota, Minnesota, and Iowa all ranked 125th warmest out of those 130 years. And our southern states ranked as this: Oklahoma 10th driest, Texas 2nd, Arkansas 9th, Mississippi 6th driest, Kentucky 2nd, Tennessee 4th, Alabama 3rd, Georgia 2nd, and you get the idea for the month of October. We've been warm and dry. I'd really hoped that Hurricane Rafael would bring some much-needed rain to the southeast U.S., but it decided to spin towards Mexico and fizzle out, with only kind of the outer band spitting a bit of rain onto the Louisiana coast. Man, hopes are waning for a big event to fill wetlands, as hurricane season winds down. It sounds like wetland conditions are currently better than last year in a lot of places, owing to several hurricanes and tropical systems this year. But remember that the expected La Nina winter predicts a drier than normal southeast U.S., which is about what I'd expect. As the Fowl Weather Podcast predicted last week, there were two really good shots of rainy systems this week, which I hoped helped some of y'all catch some rain in your wetlands. Right up until recently, the Pacific Flyway wasn't much better than the rest of the country, but recent cooler temperatures and some snow has really made ducks move better than the other three flyways so far. So to date, like we predicted, the warm eastern U.S. and cooler and snowier west have pretty much held up. This isn't to say that folks haven't had ducks or good duck hunting, but for the most part, ducks are really held up north compared to normal at this point of season. In fact, Illinois, Iowa, and Missouri are all way behind their average duck numbers. Some of that is population differences, right? Populations are down. But it's also a lot about the really mild weather that we noted. One of our main predictors of the potential for cold outbreaks into the upper Midwest and into the Atlantic Flyway during duck season is the Snow Advance Index, which is the pace of snow cover in Siberia, which when the pace is fast and Siberia is more snow-covered by the end of October, then we get this cold, high-pressure system that sets up shop in that part of the world in Siberia and then causes a wobbly jet stream across the planet and weak polar vortex. The opposite is little influence of snow cover in Siberia and a strong polar vortex, which results in cold air spinning in a super tight circle at the poles. Well, the Snow Advance Index had a case of schizophrenia this year, starting out slow, then really picking up on a punch of growing snow cover in mid-October, only to melt and then result in the lowest snow cover on record since 2015, and pretty much below the mean snow cover for that entire period. Where we are right now is a very, very organized polar vortex holding cold air north into the foreseeable future for eastern North America. Now, the developing La Nina seems to be putting some pressure on the polar vortex, resulting in an area that is stretched that will continue to bring cooler air into the Pacific Northwest. So even though we don't quite have conditions that we'd call a full-blown La Nina yet, we are already seeing signs of that signal that are expected to bring below normal temperatures and above normal precipitation to northern portions of the Pacific Flyway and into kind of the western Dakotas, I'd say. My prediction is that this will hold up and strengthen throughout this coming winter, so there's some hope for our Pacific, Central, and even Mississippi Flyway friends who derive ducks from these western regions. Remember specifically that the Mississippi Flyway in particular is like a funnel, with birds coming from across the country gathering ducks from the far west and far east down into the Mississippi Flyway. That is the bright spot, right? I also predict near to above average snowfall in portions of the prairies, which would be good news for nesting ducks coming next spring. But I don't expect most of this activity to build until well into February after duck season. March also likely has some real potential for a blizzard or two in the prairies, but I'd expect it to be spotty and not prairie nesting ground-wide events. Another solid prediction for this coming season is that the southeast U.S. will remain drier than normal, but that the upper Great Lakes region of Wisconsin, Illinois, Indiana, and Michigan, with some bleed over events into the lower Great Lakes region of Ontario, Ohio, New York, and Pennsylvania, will see above normal precipitation. We expect substantial snowfall events followed by strong thaws and then localized flooding during December and possibly into January. These effects are going to be greatest in the typical lake effect snowfall areas of the region. Coupled with a relatively warm entrance into winter, this will likely provide abundant foraging opportunities for dabbling ducks as crop fields form puddles, rivers swell, and wetland edges flood. It's also expected that diving ducks will hold up in the Mississippi River and no further south in general than Lake St. Clair and Lake Erie regions for much of the season. That is, southern portions of the Mississippi and Atlantic flyways will likely see reduced bluebill and canvasback numbers compared to normal until sometime in mid-January, I'd say, if at all. All right, but again, getting back to the west where we've got good news, I'd expect the eastern portions of the Central Flyway and the Mississippi Flyway to pick up a good number of ducks from the west this season, whereas ducks coming from the Great Lakes region and Atlantic Flyway into that area are expected to contribute way less than normal into the kind of the deep south. That all said, it's not all doom and gloom because the conditions for duck migration are already better than last year, and the atmospheric conditions aren't as much of a slam dunk as kind of that El Nino last year. And there are a bunch of indicators that the cold from the west, from the Pacific regions of Canada and the U.S., will push out into the Mississippi Flyway in kind of an irregular pattern, but enough to make ducks push south into mid and southern latitudes by late December. So kind of like a Christmas time thing. Overall, though, it is fairly certain that temperatures will be above average from now to the end of January for much of the southern portions of the Central and Mississippi Flyways and pretty much all of the Atlantic Flyway. So overall, the winter chicken dinner conditions go to the far west, and where the ducks are not will continue to be the mid to southern Atlantic states. But let's also talk about what you all call calendar ducks, which aren't a real thing, right? All of our models we've run suggest that all ducks except blue-winged teal typically react more to weather than day length alone. A calendar duck would just migrate based on the day length, and we don't find that. But typically what's going on is that the weather is still harsh enough to cause migration of these wimpy ducks like widgeon, green-winged teal, shoveler, and then I think we end up with like kind of gadwall and pintail is a little more resilient, but not like a mallard. So these wimpy ducks, by the time your season opens in many southern states, the weather has been severe enough for them to make movements out of northern latitudes into your area. They do adjust, right? They're not specifically calendar ducks. For example, the abundance of gadwall at northern latitudes late into last winter was a thing because lakes were still ice-free and those ducks hung north more than normal, suggesting not quite a calendar duck, but typically weather is severe enough to push them to your area before your season opens. So I've said this before. My friend James Callicut, I don't know who came up with it. Maybe James, maybe me. Love the gadwall and embrace the shoveler. Lots of good ducks to be had, my friends. I'm actually a fan of the widgeon. Decoy's great, migrates early, eats well, and damn, they a pretty bird for sure. So not as rosy of a long-term forecast as I'd hope for when we did our kind of preseason teaser prediction way back in early August, but definitely better than last year. Hang with us each week at the FowlWeather Podcast to find out when and where ducks will arrive in your area. Up next, some positive news during this week's duck migration forecast, so please stick with us, my friends. Hold on, folks. Don't turn that channel. We've got some really exciting news for you. The FowlWeather Podcast has teamed up with Wildlife Strategies. That's right. I'm now working directly with Ryan Delaney of Wildlife Strategies to build value into your land. Wildlife Strategies is already known for quality wildlife habitat management, be it deer, turkeys, ducks, or whatever you pursue. Ryan knows his stuff. Look, I don't add my name to just any business, but I believe in what Wildlife Strategies is doing for landowners throughout the Southeast U.S. and beyond. If you want science-based solutions to create great wildlife habitat, Wildlife Strategies is your best bet. If you're interested in ducks, when we say, may your skies be filled, well, Wildlife Strategies does just that. They fill your skies with ducks. Contact Ryan Delaney today at ryan@farmlg.com for a site visit. You won't be disappointed you did. Ryan covers the southern tier of states, and I'm available to build habitat management plans across the northern tier. Contact us today for a quote. The Wildlife Strategies team sees your property through from the initial assessment and development of a 3-year time frame management plan through annual check-ins and course corrections as needed. Contact Ryan today at ryan@farmlg.com or Dr. Mike at FowlWeather.co. You won't be disappointed you did. Fill your skies with ducks and your forests and fields with deer and turkey with Wildlife Strategies. Okay, and we are back. Just a reminder that if you have a wetland management question or own land that needs a little TLC, don't hesitate to reach out to me at drmike@FowlWeather.co. I really love talking wetlands and wetland management for waterfowl and duck hunting, so happy to help out. Let's dive right into some good news. All week in all flyways, the WSI values are great enough to continue to move widgeon, green-winged teal, and shoveler south. Starting in the east, we expect a continued exodus of these ducks from the latitude of New York, but likely the most substantial movement out of this area since their arrival in late September and early October from Canada. Some of these ducks in the east where they're leaving will be replaced by gadwall that migrate a bit later, as well as a reshuffling of pintails as some leave the Great Lakes region, but others continue to arrive from further north and west. Not really touching mallards yet because they tend to be sticky to the north all around this year. As we move west into the Mississippi Flyway, we see basically the same pattern with the main movements south this week being widgeon, green-winged teal, and shovelers from about the latitude of Iowa and Illinois into areas just slightly south, but no day sticks out as a major movement using the WSI. I'd focus on areas south of here on north winds and during the full moon towards the end of the week when there are cloudless nights. This is a really good recipe for migration, even with a slightly cold night. All duck migration other than mallards becomes increasingly likely out of the Canadian prairies this week, with best bet for a good pintail movement into the Dakotas and places farther east and south later in the week. Overall, in the Central Flyway, it really looks like a good week. Even new mallards should show up in the Dakotas later this week. So field shooting should be good this coming week, especially on Sunday. All dabbling ducks other than mallards are expected to be on the move, with gadwall and pintails showing up late week in the mid-latitude states like Nebraska and Colorado. And widgeon, green-winged teal, and shoveler are making new arrivals in Kansas and Oklahoma, with some overflight into western Texas and New Mexico as well. Mallards should be peaking in the intermountain regions of the Central and Pacific Flyway, and the cold in the Pacific in general should have all the other dabbling ducks other than mallards on the move all week into California, say California, Nevada, and Arizona. Most of these movements are predicted for early in the week for this part of the world, and the weak spot might be for pintail movement out of the intermountain regions, suggesting that pintail and mallard abundance are likely both peaking in these regions, say, including kind of the Columbia and Snake Rivers, which are kind of traditional stopover locations. Overall, weather resulting in any substantial mallard migration has really not happened yet in any of the flyways. This week, we're seeing areas of the parklands of Alberta over to Manitoba hit with WSI values that start to really push big numbers of mallards south. So as noted, folks south of these areas should be ready for fresh birds hot from the north. Some will do an overflight of the U.S. prairies and keep on trucking, but don't expect any C.W. McCall convoy coming your way farther south. It was the dark of the moon on the 6th of June in a Kenworth pulling logs. Cab over Pete with a reefer on and a Jimmy hauling hogs. We was heading for Bear and I-10 about a mile out of Shaky Town. I says, Pigpen, this here's the rubber duck, and I'm about to put the hammer down. No? Nobody? Nobody at all? Man, you kids are young. Just like when I make references to old movies in my classes. Anyhow, no convoy of mallards headed southbound on the Mississippi train. They mostly staying in their lane in the high Dakota this week, my friends across duck country. I'd sure like to be a greenhead purist, though, living it up in Devil's Lake, North Dakota this week, so... That's a wrap for the long-term forecast, and I hope you all enjoyed some positive news about ducks on the move. Thanks for listening, and as always, may your skies be filled, and shoot straight, my friends.